When Dr. Peale published the original edition of The Power of Positive Thinking, there had never been a book written on the subject. The country and the world were ready for a system of simple procedures that held out the promise of a life full of joy and satisfaction. They found it in this book by a minister from a church in New York. Perhaps that explains why The Power of Positive Thinking remains one of the most enduring inspirational works of all time.
It certainly is loved around the world, and the phrase, the power of positive thinking, has become so much a part of our culture that it's used by people who may have never read the book. Dr. Peale was always quick to point out that some people are naturally positive thinkers. Maybe it's because we're born that way. As he said, watch a healthy baby, and you'll be looking at a very positive human being. The baby expects to be loved and fed and taken care of. It's when they're growing up that children lose their positive attitudes. If the family atmosphere is negatively conditioned, then the children will adopt a negative mindset. Later, when young people get out on their own, they may want to be less negative, but they think it's too difficult to unlearn old habits and train new ones. The good news is that any bad habit can be broken, and any good habit can be cultivated. If you have desire, willpower, and imagination, you can reverse even the most ingrained thought process. How about you? Are you one of those adults who grew up in a negative environment? How do you look at your world today? Are you a positive person? Do you see yourself as made in the image of your Creator, and therefore you understand that with faith you can accomplish anything? Or are you a negative thinker, full of gloom and doom, beset with doubts about your own abilities and fear for your future? Do you focus on the problems in any situation, only seeing what can't be accomplished instead of what opportunities may be around the corner? Does it always seem that if the worst thing can happen, it will happen to you? If you feel that way, Dr. Peale says you're probably right. He called it the law of attraction.
Now, negative thinking is a very dangerous thing. The negative thinker constantly sends out into the world around him negative thoughts, and he activates the world around him negatively. There is a law known as the law of attraction. Like attracts like. So if you constantly send out negative thoughts, in the very nature of the case, you tend to bring back to yourself negative results. On the contrary, the positive thinker sends out positive thoughts, and he activates the world around him positively. And on the basis of the same law of attraction, tends to draw back to himself positive results. What is your world in which you live at the present time? Is it negative or is it positive? Whatever it is, it has been created by how you think. What will your life be 10 years from now? It will be what you think about for the next 10 years as your primary and motivating thought. One of the wisest men who ever lived in this country was a man named William James, who was at one time professor at Harvard University and who is considered to be the father of American psychological science. And he said, among other wise things, the chief discovery of my generation is, well, in his generation was discovered the principle of the automobile, the telephone, the electric light, the radio tube, all of them tremendous inventions. But he said that the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. And nobody's ever risen up to dispute that. So that if you are not satisfied, nor am I, with our lives as they are at the present time, they can be altered by altering the mental attitude, by how we think. Now, some people have asked me at times, is there any relationship between positive thinking and the Bible? Well, that's where it comes from. The Bible is the greatest positive thinking book ever written. Now, it's full of pain, sorrow, defeat, suffering, woe, and sin. But it's also full of the overcoming of all these things. In the world it said, ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world.
No one, not even Jesus himself, ever lived a life without trouble. But with positive faith, you can handle trouble and come through it a stronger and more energized person. Dr. Peel was quick to emphasize that you can change from being a negative thinker to functioning fully in a positive way. All you have to do is want to do it. Desire for change must become your #1 priority. And even more than desire, there must be intense desire. If you don't want to be positive in your outlook more than you want anything else, there's very little chance it will happen. It really is up to you. It's also important to realize that the positive thinker doesn't refuse to recognize the negative. Of course not. Negative elements do exist. The difference is that the positive thinker sees the negative but refuses to dwell on it. Instead of being resigned to things having gone wrong, the positive thinker looks for the good in a bad situation. Like the old saying, when life gives positive thinkers lemons, they make lemonade. The positive thinker is tough-minded and refuses to be defeated. The positive thinker makes the most of what he has or she has to deal with in life. When things go wrong, as they are bound to do at times, the positive thinker finds a way to bring triumph out of tragedy. Dr. Peel's friend Marcia Butcher was one of those people.
And then there's Marcia Butcher. Who's Marcia? She now is 26 years old. She was a gusty, enthusiastic, high-living girl. And she loved to ride motorcycles. And she rode them fast. And one day she rode it too fast. And it went over a cliff. And the net result, she was paralyzed in her legs at age 24. But she wasn't paralyzed in her head, nor was she paralyzed in her faith, because she had a lot of faith. So she was in a wheelchair, and an idea occurred to her one day. Why couldn't I be the fastest wheelchair driver in the United States? So she found that there was actually held a marathon every now and then in the Orange Bowl in Miami, and she entered it after a lot of practice, and she won the wheelchair marathon in 3 hours, 40 minutes, and 10 seconds, 5 seconds faster than the world record. So she's committed her life to helping people in wheelchairs live a tremendously exciting and successful life. She didn't become vice president of the country. She didn't make a lot of money. She didn't run for United States senator and get her name in the paper. But She practiced positive thinking and she became a tremendous success.
Dr. Peel always liked to illustrate his points with the accomplishments of athletes. One of the most unusual sports figures he spoke about was Stanley Arnold. As Dr. Peel told the story, Stanley Arnold is a small man physically, but a big man mentally. He went to high school in Cleveland, and he was turned away from every sport he wanted to play. He was too small for football, too short for basketball, too uncoordinated for baseball and track. Instead of sitting around being upset, Stanley decided to start a new sport. After he had practiced it at home until he knew he could perform with great success, Stanley inaugurated it at school. The new sport was jumping backward. Before long, he became the backward jumper of Cleveland. Amazingly, at the same time he mastered jumping backward, Stanley learned to go forward. And as an adult, he became the greatest idea man in the United States. His services were in demand by companies all across the country. Stanley Arnold didn't let the fact he wasn't built like a traditional athlete keep him from succeeding on the playing field. Instead of moping around because he couldn't participate in the sports that were available, he started a new sport that matched his size and talents. That's positive thinking.
In his book, Why Some Positive Thinkers Get Powerful Results, Dr. Peel defined positive thinking by describing a positive thinker. He says, a positive thinker is a person who's strong, tough, and rugged mentally. He or she sees every difficulty, but sees it straight. They aren't dismayed by any adversity, setback, or seemingly impossible condition, because they know that with the help of the good God, they can see through, think through, pray through, and get through any difficulty. To any tough problem, the positive thinker says, yeah, I know, but then they go ahead and accomplish their goals, attracting success to themselves and their projects.
Everything Dr. Peel wrote and every speech and sermon he gave somehow led back to the idea of positive thinking. We're going to be telling you about the steps Dr. Peel suggested you should take on the path to attaining various positive qualities. You'll find that each of these steps will also take you closer to being a positive thinker, because positive thinking is the core of a healthy attitude and a successful life. Here now are 5 steps that Dr. Peel outlined for changing your mental attitudes from negative to positive, for releasing creative new thoughts, and for shifting from error patterns to truth patterns. If they seem difficult, it's because you need them. We promise if you keep trying, they will work. Step number 1. For the next 24 hours, only say hopeful, positive things about your job, your health, your family, and your future. Be optimistic about everything. Restrain yourself from being negative, no matter how awful the situation seems. Then continue this pattern for a full week. If you can be positive for 1 day, you can be positive for 7 days, and on for a lifetime.
The second step is, feed your mind while you feed your body. Start shifting your mind from negative to positive thinking by reading uplifting books and magazines. This means that you stay away from attention-grabbing news stories and sensationalism. Read through the Bible and pay attention to the times that faith and hope are mentioned. Get biographies of men and women who've achieved great success by overcoming enormous obstacles. Notice how they did it, and you'll see that it was positive thinking that made the difference.
Step 3. Make a list of the friends you spend a lot of time with and put a check mark next to those who are positive thinkers. Deliberately make an effort to be with them more often. Don't abandon the negative thinkers you know. Instead, soak up positive attitudes from the positive thinkers, then go back among your negative friends and try and influence them. You can set their feet on the path to a positive tomorrow. The fourth step toward positive thinking is to avoid arguments